Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Cassandra Bell. I'm a first-year PhD student in the psychology department at Rutgers Newark. I'll be presenting our project, which is on the effect of gun violence on threat processing today. This work is funded by the New Jersey Gun Violence Research Center, and the PIs on this project are Dr. Mauricio Delgado and Dr. Vanessa Lebu. And we have a few others from the psychology department working on this project as well. So to start, as I'm sure everybody knows, gun violence is prevalent in the United States, and we've talked a little bit about how gun deaths are increasing. In 2021, there were 14.6 gun deaths per 100,000 people, which is the highest rate it has been since the 1990s. And these homicide and suicide rates are as of 2023, which has been less than 5 months. And with these increases in gun deaths, we've kind of seen a little bit of more recent incidences in the news, I think. And one of those you might have heard about last week was the Atlanta hospital shooting, where one person was killed and 4 others were injured. And while the survivors of the shooting are obviously impacted by this, so are other people around them and who were present for the incident. And I think this is really explained by a tweet the hospital made. They said this tragedy is affecting all of us, and we ask for patience and prayers at this time. And so with increases in gun deaths, we can presume there are increases in exposure to gun violence as well. And outside of death, gun violence is linked to a host of other social and emotional outcomes, and this includes depression, risky behavior, and anxiety. And exposure to gun violence can be witnessing someone get shot, seeing someone threatened with a gun, hearing gunshots, and of course, direct victimization. This is particularly relevant in Newark, where we are conducting our research. In a study that was conducted across multiple sites, one of those was Rutgers Newark, and another site was Penn State, which is in University Park, Pennsylvania. Research was done with a community population, and of Newark participants from our community, 55% reported exposure to gun violence, whereas in University Park, that number is 9%. So it's prevalent here within our community, but also among our undergraduate students. Of a survey of over 1,000 undergraduate students the past fall and spring semester, 32% of them report some type of exposure to gun violence. And in the study I'll be discussing today, our sample, 43% of them report some type of exposure to gun violence. So our current study, we're broadly interested in threat processing behaviorally and in the brain for individuals exposed to gun violence. One of our first aim is just to kind of examine the types of violence people experience in their communities. Then we're interested in their behavioral responses to various threats for those exposed to gun violence, and then how to characterize the neural mechanisms of these behavioral responses. And I will be discussing preliminary data from the behavioral portion of our study, and then touch on the MRI portion, which we are still collecting data for. So our study was conducted with Rutgers Newark undergraduate students. The first part was online, and participants who completed the online portion and indicated interest in the MRI are being invited to come in and complete the MRI portion, which is in person. So I'll start by talking about the behavioral portion of the study. Participants completed a Qualtrics survey. They then completed a response to threat task, which is a matrix task, and a decision-making under risk task, which is a BART task, and then a feedback survey where we just asked for what they thought about the games they played and just any sort of feedback they had on the study they just did online. For the Qualtrics survey, we're interested in gathering detailed information about different types of exposure to violence and individual differences among variables of interest, such as risk and anxiety and neighborhood chaos. After this, they complete the matrix task, where we're interested in how long it takes participants to respond to threatening images. So there are 3 blocks in this task. The first block is the community block. There's a social block and an animal block, and these are randomized across trials. and there are 72 trials per block. And we're interested in how long it takes participants to look toward a threat. So that would be, for example, in the bottom left here, finding a gun among objects, or looking away from threat, which on the bottom right here, it would be finding a frog among snakes. And the stop signs you see in the center are just attention checks, so we can ensure that participants are actually paying attention to the task. And after this, they complete a decision-making under risk task, which is the BART task. And we're interested in assessing participants' willingness to take risk. So each pump of a balloon, they earn points. And if the balloon pops, they earn nothing. So in this first example, you can see that the participant pumps the balloon 36 times, cashes it in, and wins $1.80. In this loss example in the red, the participant pumps the balloon 35 times, the balloon pops, so they earn nothing. And there are 20 trials in this task. So I'll talk a little bit about some preliminary data from our matrix task. So on the y-axis here, you can see we're looking at average response time in seconds. On the x-axis, we have the different blocks I showed you, animal, community, and social. And this is preliminary because it's not the full sample. It's just 97 of the participants. The threat condition is how long it takes them, is when we're looking at how long it takes them to find the threatening image among neutral images. So that'd be like finding the gun among the objects. And in the neutral condition, we're interested we're looking at how long it takes them to find the neutral image among the threatening images. And as expected, participants are faster at finding the threat in the animal and social blocks, but we did not find this is the case in the community block, where they're actually faster at finding the neutral image among the threatening image. And when you break this down by exposed and non-exposed, so individuals who are exposed to gun violence and who are not, these patterns hold true across the different conditions, except we can see, interestingly, in the community block, participants who are exposed to gun violence are faster at detecting threat than the participants who are not exposed, and slower at looking away from threat than participants who are not exposed to gun violence. This is preliminary, so we'll run further analysis on this as well. So I briefly went over the behavioral portion of our study, and I'll now talk about the MRI portion that we're still conducting, as I mentioned. So as I talked about in the beginning, we're interested in the neural mechanisms underlying these responses to threat. So participants will complete a daily diary survey for 5 days, 2 to 7 days before their scan. Then they'll come in for the scan. They'll complete an aggression measure and then practice the tasks that they'll be completing in the scanner. They'll complete the scan itself, which has an emotional reactivity task, an emotion regulation task, and a decision-making task. Then they will come out of the scanner and rate the stimuli they just saw in the scanner. So for the daily diary, we're interested in collecting more recent information on stressful experiences, their exposure to violence, and how they dealt with these. So we're asking questions about the previous 24 hours. So the first question we'll ask is just how they felt about their day. They can rate how pleased they were from a scale of 1 to 4, strongly agree to strongly disagree. The next 3 questions will be about their exposure to violence, and they can rate this as well on a scale of 1 to 4, from yes many times to no. And then the last question, we ask how they have dealt with this stress that they experienced in the last 24 hours. So they're provided options, and they can indicate whether they did that and then how often. They can also say they didn't experience stress or they didn't try to deal with their stress. Then for the scan itself, the first task they'll complete in the scanner is the emotional reactivity task, which is the picture rating task. And in this, we're trying to see how people rate threatening images. So there are 3 different conditions: a weapons condition, which includes guns and knives, a physical violence condition, which includes like punching and kicking, and then the neutral counterparts of these images, The neutrals for weapons would be someone holding like a hairdryer or a microphone, and the neutrals for physical violence would be like stretching or fixing a collar or something like that. The participants are presented with the image for 4 seconds, and they're told just to look at the image. Then there's a fixation for 2 to 4 seconds. They're presented with the image again, and now they're asked to rate how nervous the picture makes them feel. They're presented with another fixation, and they go through these for 40 trials. In this task, we'll also be collecting eye tracking data so that we'll be able to look at the natural eye patterns of participants while they're looking at these threatening images. In the emotion regulation task, the setup is the same and the conditions are the same. They're just 40 new pictures. And we're interested in looking at distraction as an emotional regulation technique. So in this task, participants will be presented with an image, and a circle will be in either one of the 4 corners or in the center of the image near the threatening aspect of the image. And participants are instructed to look at the circle when the image is being presented for the 4 seconds. And then afterwards, they rate the image and how nervous it makes them feel. And we're interested to see if when participants are looking in at the circles in one of the corners, which would be the distracting condition, if they rate the images as less threatening than when they're looking directly at the threatening aspect of the picture. And we're also collecting eye tracking data for this as well. So we'll be able to see if participants are actually looking at the circle when they're told to. In the last task they complete in the scanner, this is a decision-making task. So we're interested in assessing risk in the context of wins and losses. So participants will play a game in a win domain and a loss domain. In each domain, there's a 60, 40, or 80, 20% chance of winning or losing the outcome. And there's 10 trials in each for a total of 40 trials. So participants are presented with a choice. So they can choose between a 40% chance of winning or losing $1.50 or a 60% chance of winning or losing $1. There's a delay, and then they see the outcome of their choice. So they either win or lose whatever option they selected, or they don't win or lose. There's another delay, and then they go through the task again. And this is the same idea for the 80-20, except for they have an 80% chance of winning or losing 75 cents, or a 20% chance of winning or losing $3. And in the loss condition, we're interested to see how participants make decisions in an adversive context. And so with this, they'll come out of the scanner, and then participants will complete a stimulus rating task where they just rate the images they saw in the scanner from the first 2 tasks. So they'll be presented with 80 old images and 10 new images for a total of 90 trials. These 10 new images are happy images, just to kind of intermix that with, obviously, these are all very upsetting pictures to some, just to kind of lighten the mood at the end of the study. So participants are asked how violent the image is and how clear the image is, and it's on a scale of 1 to 4 again. And we're having them rate these because we want to make sure that participants' responses on how nervous the image makes them feel in the scanner is relevant to their experiences and not to the arousing aspect of the picture itself. So the picture might not actually be violent to them, which is why they don't rate it as violent, and that has nothing to do with their actual exposure. And this baby is just an example of a happy picture that they see intermixed. In conclusion, gun violence is not only a cause of death, but has long-term impacts on individuals who are exposed to this violence, even if they're not direct victims of it. With our study, we hope to learn how individuals exposed to gun violence respond to threat, make decisions, and regulate their emotions in the presence of threat, how this is represented in the brain, and the role of individual differences in these outcomes. And with this information, we hope to better understand how to intervene and help buffer against the effects of exposure to gun violence outside of course, stricter gun laws. And with that, I would like to thank the New Jersey Gun Violence Research Center for funding this work, the Child Study Center, which is the lab I'm in, the Delgado Lab, and in particular, my advisor, Dr. Vanessa Labu, Dr. Mauricio Delgado, who's my second mentor, Jamila, Michaela, Mary, and Yen for all of their help on this project. And great. I guess now I take questions if anybody has any. Thank you. Well, I guess if nobody has questions, we can all listen to the next speaker. Thank you, Stanley. Okay, well, I guess thank you everybody who came and listened. If you have any questions or interested to see what we're doing, we'll be here in Newark. Thank you.